Hello and welcome to season 6, episode 41 of Dualistic Unity. I have so we've taken a bit of time off the last week and a half to get, you know, reassess business and everything that we're doing. We've been pushing the last few months, last couple of years, quite frankly, um, and just continuing. And last week has been good. Things have gotten settled. I think at least for me, I won't speak for Ray and Amanda, but for myself, I've realized how much, something like dualistic unity, the conversation, a lot of what season one and season two focused on, can become more of a focus than life, more of a focus than what's real. And it can become, a very, as it always is, a very personal journey as life is, but there can be a sense of separation instead of connection that you can get caught up in if you focus the conversation on you, make it about you. And so I've taken a look at that in myself and recognized how much I have made that a focus. And I'm realizing just how much it's not really about that. It can be a conversation that you dive into from time to time, and it can be informative in a sense of when it informs you in a way that isn't about you so much or anything that you're thinking necessarily has to do with you. And at the end of the day, there's pretty much just some basic applications, when you get back to, human needs, necessities, eat, sleep, go to the bathroom, stay hydrated as best you can. And then you kind of keep that in the, priority of your life, paying rent, things like that. You got a company you're working on, you got a job, prioritizing those things and then expanding from there. And I think sometimes with the conversation, it can get a little bit inverted, and those can become things that aren't as much the primary focus, and you can kind of lose sight of that. And when you are focused on yourself being on some path or journey, the path and the journey can become more of a focus than all of those things I mentioned previously. The basics of life, and you know, you go through your life, you live your life, and you just do your best, quite frankly, to not be an asshole, be it to people around you, be it to yourself, and you keep going. There isn't too much more that you got to think about. Obviously, things arise as you extend from there, things to think about in relationship to those, but you don't have to make it so much about you. And so those are just some of the things that I've been taking a look at myself, and I am excited to be back to recording some episodes.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons that the expression that philosophy is the disease for which it should be the cure settled so well with me when I first heard it, was because it is so very easy to get caught up in what the conversation means about you, what the insights mean about you. And it's the same old trap that has always existed. We've done it about everything, whether it's, about your music knowledge or your sports knowledge or your knowledge of feminist history or your knowledge of ancient Egypt, whatever it might be. It's always very easy to take that knowledge and make it define you. This isn't something that's new at all. I mean, the Nazis did it. They looked at the science of evolution and then changed it to, and therefore, everything awesome that led to here led to us, which is awesome. Therefore, it's all about us. And that's where all of a sudden they lost. The miracle of the insight that they were looking at was that human beings are adapting, that human beings are in constant flux and constant adaptation, that there is an intelligence behind our physical form, all that stuff. But no, it just became, no, we're the master race. And that happens, with spirituality. It happens with everything. It happens with science. It's the difference between, scientific theory and scientism, which is very much, the full-hearted belief in whatever science says this is the truth. But science never says this is the truth. Science says, as far as we know, this is the truth. Maybe, right? And so it's the willingness to settle in the uncertainty, in the fact that there's always more to see, but that it never means anything about you because you've seen more.
Yeah. Yeah, like the scientific guess isn't a scientific guarantee, but it's easy to view it that way because we are banking on it. We're investing in that. It's like, you we're not assholes, but we certainly act like them. And where does that come from? And that comes from thinking that, we're so invested in a certain concept. And whether that concept is season one or two, or that concept is the concept of science or philosophy, it's just that's not the reality that you're living in. And as much as we can invest in the concept is that's not the point. And even if we think like, oh, this could be it, and this is my best guess, and just leaving it at that. I don't need to have 100% certainty. I don't need to have zero doubts and zero fears and zero insecurities. But I certainly can make the most of what's happening in reality right now, which is this moment and everyone or everything that seems to be in it. And I say seemed because, right now it seems like my entire life, my entire moment is this room with the two of you in it. And, everyone who is, you know, that I'm aware could be watching, right? But you're not in the room right now, technically. And, but that's why it seems like it's just the three of us in this room. But there are people that are walking outside right now. There's people in the city, there's people in the country, people on the planet. Like, what seems to be the case isn't. And so even when I'm invested in what it seems to be, you know, it's uh it's okay to just be okay with the fact that, what I'm thinking and what I'm seeing isn't everything. And that doesn't stop me from taking in other considerations that I may not be able to look at or directly engage with. So it's very much like when we think about decisions and how sometimes there's that I forget the word, but it's like before your decision is made on some scan, they've seen that like the decision has kind of already been made before you like press the button, and it's like button A and button B, and it's like I choose B, but somehow they've been able to see that like the decision for button B was already made before I pushed it. And it's like, well, are the choices mine? And it's like, for me, the way that I like to think about it is like it's like everything is existing right now. So everything is everything. Like I to some degree am everything or an expression of everything. And so it feels like everything is informing the decision that I seem to be making. And both of those things are somehow it feels like they're happening at the same time. And yet I don't feel like I'm in conflict with that. Like I don't need to be sure, like, is it I or is it everything? Where are these decisions coming from? It's like, no, there's a decision happening, and it seems like, it's coming from multiple places, but ultimately the experience will be it's my choice. And that choice is a part of the experience of, what seems to be my life. But my life doesn't just include me, or the idea of me or just Amanda. It's just like it includes so much, and yet it feels incredibly intimate and extremely shared in a way that doesn't always feel pleasant, but feels incredibly worthwhile. And so for no crazy reason or no reason at all, I'm still glad to be sitting here with the both of you in this room right now. And somehow this all feels worthwhile still.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think when there are choices made, there, because you can start to get caught up in thinking like, oh my gosh, there's so much happening, there's so much going on. It's like yes and no, because sometimes it can feel like, you start thinking and all of a sudden there's a lot happening, but where is it happening? Is it happening, in your head, or is it happening in reality? Because as much as there's so much happening in reality all the time, as you said, right now, my universe is this room, this microphone, computer in front of us. And it's it's not so much. It's in what you're doing, the step that you're taking. It's kind of one thing. It's not so many things, but you start thinking about where things come from. Why am I doing this? Where's it going? What's it leading to? What's the future going to be like? What's my past been like? I want to understand where my, sense of this or that is coming from. Is it coming from this previous experience that I had when I was a kid, my upbringing, blah, 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 blah. And then, like, right there, the last 30 seconds, that seems like so much. But it's not really what's happening. There isn't so much. I'm talking and we're sitting here and we're recording this, and that's not so much. And so when you start to get focused on, I don't know, how much is going on, or assuming that, there's so much to this process and journey and all of these things, I think it can help to take a step back and wonder where so much is happening. Is it happening in your assumptions and your thoughts in your head, or is it happening in what's real, what you can feel, what you can see, what you can touch, what you can smell? Because there are a lot of things there, but it doesn't feel quite like it's so much. It's not so overwhelming because oftentimes the so much is about yourself, but you're just something that's involved in so much of reality, and that's a lot more basic, a little bit more, it's not to say straightforward, but we can absolutely turn things far more complex, unnecessarily complex, when we start thinking, and wondering about things in our head. And so when it comes to choices, like, where is the choice coming from? You mentioned making decisions and choices, and I think it's epiphenomenalism
Yeah,
when
yeah.
it's choosing the button or which button to choose, and are you pressing it when you're making the choice, or was it already made? And with choices too, like choosing to go to the bathroom because you feel like you have to go to the bathroom. That's a choice that's made in reality, and absolutely, I'm not saying there isn't a benefit of having a mind and being able to think about things and consider things and weigh different options, but and it's like nothing is black and white, everything's gray area, but how much of those choices are focused on, the pondering, the thinking, the considerations, assuming that there's a way to guarantee something when that's never going to be the case. So how many of those choices are happening, in the so much of your mind that can expand very quickly as soon as you think that that should be the priority, or yourself should be the priority, versus how much of those choices are happening based on what's actually real, the things like choosing, you get a growl in your stomach, maybe go eat something. You're living in a place, you got to pay rent, do something to help yourself pay rent. And those aren't so many thoughts necessarily. It's what's happening. It's what's real. And I think when that is more of the focus and priority, life, it's not to say it gets simpler because there's still so much to it, but it isn't quite as complex as we can make it by trying to, or assuming that we can guarantee what's next.
Yeah, it's not simpler, but it's less suffering, and it's, the choices involving like the body are, easier to, to talk about because you can see them in like a black and white kind of way. Bladder is full of liquid, it sends a signal. The decision to make a bathroom just makes sense, because it's like if you don't make that decision, your body will make that decision without you. At some point you will piss yourself. So that's a little different than, it's choices that involve other people, and that involve, friends and family members or business partners. It's those choices are the ones that feel like they're a lot harder to make, but they're just as straightforward. It's It's, does this make sense, or does this get me somewhere? Does this make sense, or does this give me more certainty, more control? And, a lot of the times, that is where the choice is coming from when it's in relation to someone else. You know, am I going to be stuck in my head, or am I going to be in the room, chatting with the people that are in there with me? And that feels pretty straightforward, because whether you think so or not, it's not invisible when you're in your head. So you've made the decision um to go out with your friends, and then all of a sudden you're, quiet, and then if you do talk, it's almost panicked. And so it's like, did you decide to have a panic attack at that moment? Not really. It doesn't feel that way, but ultimately that's the experience that everybody's having. And so what's the choice there? Are you the person who's supposed to notice that you're having a panic attack and then check that? Are your friends supposed to tell you, hey, are you okay? Like, the line between helping and enabling is gray. And so sometimes you're like, hey, are you okay? And then sometimes you're like, hey, snap the fuck out of it. And for me, a lot of that comes from, my experience with myself, the way that I talk to myself. And we've said that a lot. The way that the choices that we tend to make with other people are a reflection of the choices that we make by ourselves. And so making choices when it's just you, that's one thing. But it's like, very rarely are you making choices in a vacuum where it's just you and it's just about you. Usually your choices will have a ripple and it's going to impact someone else. And so it's like, how do you deal with the frustration of trying to be empathetic, but then, with yourself and with others, and then but not trying to enable yourself or others? It doesn't really feel like it should be, so difficult.
For sure. Yeah. And so, yeah, I was discussing the basics that have to do personally, like in a vacuum. And I appreciate that. You're like, well, there's more going on and more happening. And I think, when those basics are the priority, like it can make some of those decisions with other people easier, with relationships easier, for example, with a job. You got a job, say you got your own business that you're running and starting, trying to get it off the ground, make money. It's like that, because that is one of the like ultimate basics of life, that is going to have a higher priority than things that don't have to do so much with that. And relationships that have to do with that will have, for the time that that's being built, at the very least, more priority than some of those other things. And so I think that's what I was trying to say with the expansion from there, is that then that helps inform. But to your point, there is, very much the reflection of how you talk to yourself versus and how you talk to someone else, because a lot of times it's almost the same, and how much responsibility you're taking for yourself. There's going to be almost like a reflective lack of responsibility outside of yourself, or if there is a lack, there's going to be a lack. If there's a priority, there's going to be more of a priority. And when you start to get a sense for empathy and, not putting yourself first, and kind of that full circle selfishness, it makes a lot more sense. And what I mean with the full circle selfishness is that, it to just solely prioritize yourself and what you want and what you need, deep down doesn't really feel very good at all. When you stop doing that so much, there can be a shift. And if, your focus is trying to stay in control of things, control of, always choosing what you want to do. And there's going to be a lot more conflict, because the reality is that, as we've said many times throughout this podcast, that control over, oh, if I just do this, then I'll feel this way. or if I do this, then I'll
Mhm.
get this. It's not to say that you don't have choices to make. It's not like there is some external control happening, but there just isn't that guarantee of the next step. And so when those priorities are focused on a little bit more, things just have a way of making more sense. It's not to say that life isn't complex, but it's just that we don't make it more complex than it needs to be because you
Mhm.
can't really think and make it less complex. It is what it is, but thinking can absolutely make it feel like it's a lot more complex than just what it is.
Well, yeah. Well, again, I think the complexity, or it's not even complexity that's the problem. It's the attachment, right? Like you can, if I were to give you a puzzle that's complicated and say you have all the time in the world, doesn't matter, just have fun with it. You would go at it and it might take you a little while, but you'd figure it out. And that would be it. And then you'd move on with your life. But if I gave you that same puzzle and I said, and if you can't figure this out in a certain amount of time, you're a fucking idiot and you're less than everybody else. All of a sudden, you're not just thinking about the puzzle, you're thinking about what the puzzle means about you, which means each and every decision that you make, each and every time that you're trying to figure out something, all of a sudden it's going through the filter of, oh my God, I haven't figured this out yet. What does that mean about me? Or, oh, I figured it out. Therefore, I'm fucking awesome. And then inevitably comes the disappointment that comes when you hit a part of the puzzle that's more challenging.
Mhm.
There's a whole emotional thing that goes, which is making it about you rather than it just being about the information and the task at hand. That's very much the point. I'll share a story with our listener. Hello, listener. Um, Recently ran into somebody from a distant and ancient part of my life. This person was a big part of what was ultimately a very dark period for me and was a distant memory, long forgotten. Suddenly shows up as not a primary character within the stuff that we're doing in the community here, but kind of a tertiary character, a character, kind of in the background, doing their own thing, having an influence over the community that I'm in, but living in the community despite not being from here and I'm not from here. And like the chances of all of this happening at this exact time is very slim. And realizing that this person is now in my life, or rather a part of whatever ongoings are happening around me, I had the option of thinking about myself and thinking about all the stories I told myself about this person and when whatever it is that happened and what they might have done to me and just how it affected my life, basically the victim story that I had held on to for a little while, and so for a solid day I just sat there going, well, look at all that. Like, look at all that story I've got about this person and what it means about me and my life. And wow, there's a lot of judgments about my life and the choices I've made. Oh, wow, there's a lot of judgments about myself as a person back then. And you're just looking at all this stuff going through, not thinking like, oh my God, I'm going through this again. Therefore, I'm backsliding. Oh my goodness, this person, they hit my triggers. And you don't make it about you. You just let the process happen. You stare at the puzzle. Because what else are you going to do? But if it's about you, then all of a sudden it becomes a totally different thing. It's not just a puzzle. It's not just a way to spend your existence. It's not just another experience that could be both challenging and fun. Instead, it's something that's heavy. Instead, it's something that's quote unquote complicated. But it's not. I mean, everything is very simple. Time and attention. That's all anything really comes down to. Time and attention. And when you have a challenge in front of you, put some time and attention into it. It'll disappear. Or you can think about what it means about you. And then you'll put neither time nor attention into it. And you'll wonder why you're stuck there.
Yeah, because it's not something to overcome like that. When you do notice something, a situation, or someone else, and notice that maybe, for example, there's noticed attachment, or stories you have about them, or even recognize something in yourself you notice tendencies that maybe you weren't as aware of. As soon as you turn it into something that means something about you, it can become something to overcome. And then it's not just letting it happen, it's I have to do something, like bring it out of my head and do something in reality in order to do it. Like, you know, for example, if you notice someone from your past, it's like now I have to prove that I have overcome this. And so I have to, be friendly to them if I want to see myself as a friendly person, or I have to, not talk to them in order to, prove that I don't have to prove anything to myself. And you can go pretty berserk with it and kind of double down when the alternative is seeing it, seeing them as a person, maybe understanding that, if you've changed as a person, that maybe they have too, and not adding anything or making it something that you have to prove because they're a new person. They, whether how much they've changed or not, and you're a new person. And so I think a lot of times, we can turn things into when you start to be, more reflective or just more, I don't know, sensitive to your own tendencies or stories or whatever it is. As soon as we turn it into something to overcome or to get rid of, or we judge it, that's where the additional complexity comes. And then choices mean something. Again, choices mean something about you, and it becomes a should. And then it's like, well, I got to do this by now. I should go, find their number and figure out and connect and just to make sure that this or that or this or that. And so yeah, that sense of overcoming something, I think, is really what you don't have to focus on.
Yeah. And the alternative is to just live my life moment to moment, as I always do. And when and if the person comes into a moment and shares an experience with me, maybe they're passing me a piece of paper to pass to somebody else, or, we both hear a song, hey, that's great. There doesn't have to be the story of this character that goes with that interaction. They can just be a human in that moment with me. They can just be a part of that moment. And without the story that I tell myself purely because I'm reinforcing a story about me, then there's just the interaction. There's just the moment here with no weight. And then it turns into something else and they're gone because you're not holding on to it. Right? Maybe they come back again and then they leave again. And through moments like that, perhaps you end up forming some kind of a relationship, which doesn't mean attachment. It means a relationship with this person wherein you become a different part of their environment. And that's it. There doesn't have to be a story because the story is overly simplistic. There can just be what is right now and the understanding that we don't know everything. Do the best we can.
Yeah. I had a situation a few months ago. This reminds me of it. I was in a coffee shop and had a ex, not, it wasn't girlfriend necessarily, but person that I liked a lot. And they weren't ready to make that next jump. So it was a relationship over the course of a number of months, about a year. And I saw them and they saw me, and immediately just a wave of, oh my gosh, it had been a few years since I had seen them. And I felt that. And I think in those moments you have the opportunity to panic and, like, pack up your stuff and get out of there, or see that, like, of course there's that response to seeing someone that you had certain, a certain relationship to. It's not that you haven't, gotten over them quite yet. It's like, no, that's just your body responding to things. And it's not, at that point, it's not even, it's hardly thoughts. Sure, it's coming from, an idea to some degree that you have, but I think we can even focus on, oh, I shouldn't have that response to things. And as soon as that becomes the case, that's when it's doubling down. And then there's the panic, and then there's the, frantic response instead of just seeing that, no, no, that's what's happening right now. I don't have to react to this now. I can let it be. And that was my response that time. And she sat down, we chatted for, 20 minutes or so, and then she left, and that was that. And it was fine. And how the conversation went wasn't really that relevant. It was just catching up real quick, and that was it. And it could have so easily become this kind of strange sort of thing if there had been a reaction to something that I thought maybe, oh, I shouldn't, I thought I was over that by now. And it's like you don't have to fucking overcome all of the things that you think. And I think when you start noticing more things, there can be, in yourself or in the world, there can be this feeling, even with, you notice that, oh, the world, it's a terrible place. We got to save the world. We got to save the world. It's like, okay. Or, just relax a little bit, understand maybe where some of that is coming from, like why the world is the way it is, and just don't do as many of those things. But to assume like you personally have to save it, or you got to get a group together to save it, is another one of those panicked responses, that sense of overcoming. And that is a lot of times the basis of what leads to a world that's in chaos, a world that's wild, a world that has, you know, suffering to degrees, or responses like that. And so it's not to say that you shouldn't recognize certain things, but it's not that you have to do something in order to change it, as if there's that degree of control. And that goes for yourself as well. You can notice things without needing to change them, without setting a goal of having overcome certain things. Or like when you try something new, like I've been playing guitar for a little bit, and I've been playing for a week and have improved quite a bit. And I don't have any thoughts about, like, oh, I gotta learn this song by this time, or by next year I have this goal of being able to play 20 songs and being able to play them perfectly. Like that would add so much weight, and then I would structure things backwards. And this was something I used to do in my life all the time. And then it wouldn't be as enjoyable. All of a sudden it would be something that, becomes a task, becomes a should. And the alternative is not having that, down the road thing where it's like, oh, I set this goal because it'll mean something about me. Because then you get there and it's like you're saying, you feel good or you feel bad about yourself, one way or the other. The alternative is just, you know, playing some here and there and seeing what happens, not even thinking about how you're doing. And all of a sudden, you think for a moment about how you're doing a couple months later, and it's like, oh, I know a lot more. That's cool. It doesn't mean that I'm a better person. Maybe you could say you're better at playing the guitar, but it has nothing to do with you as a human being, because you now know a little bit more of an instrument. It doesn't add to you so much. It's just, another thing that you can do. And, as you said, you put that time and attention in, and if that's the priority, then of course things are going to shift and change. But as soon as it means something about you, it turns it into, you know, a big old process that can feel very complex when it doesn't have to be. It's unnecessary.
Yeah, it's another experience. It's for the most part, it's a lot of repetitive. This is what's happening now. Is regardless of your opinion. Um, things are happening. Life is here right now. It's live, and sometimes you're gonna love it, and it feels like you want that moment to last forever, and it doesn't. And sometimes it feels like you wish the moment couldn't end any sooner, and then it does change. But ultimately, it's just a lot of experiences, evolving and just changing shape, like shape shifting experiences, changing into another one. And there's so much to take from all of them, because there's so much to take from experience. Experience has, a limitless depth. that you could explore. And so it's like being able to hold your breath underwater and explore underwater and never having to come up for air, but having the option to if you felt like it.
Yeah. And being able to continue to experience life like that. And then if you do have a moment where you feel like you want to come up for air real quick, not also not measuring how long you can stay underwater. It's like you get a breath of fresh air, and if you think that means something about you, it's like, oh, I shouldn't have gotten a breath of fresh air. All of a sudden, you're going to go back underwater and try and take a breath of fresh air, and then you panic, and then that's when someone drowns instead of just seeing that, there's a process to that too. How long you can spend underwater doesn't mean anything about you, but it's not something that just happens overnight. There's a process there. And it's like, I guess almost just letting processes happen, letting things play out, but also not, assuming that they're, getting too tied up in what the fuck a process even means. Cause that's something that, you can just start thinking about. Like maybe there isn't a process so much as as you said, an ongoing, just this is what's happening. This is what's happening. And then, whether it's learning an instrument, whether it's doing a podcast, like no need to set goals. Just do some episodes and do some more and then do some more. And, I think when you're making it about you, it's like that's where, oh, you got to set a goal. You got to do this. And that sense of goal setting gives you that sense of like, all right, I'm doing something more just because, but you're making just the thing that you're doing more, and then it's more complex than it needs to be instead of it just being about time and attention. Like you don't have to set goals. You don't have to set something in the future that gives you that sort of false sense of certainty, false sense of a guarantee, because then you're setting yourself up for measuring yourself and feeling a certain way about yourself because you set the goal, you do or you don't get it, you feel good or bad about yourself. But it's the same sort of focus that doesn't help you with, the next step that you take because the step that you take, the step that you're on has nothing to do with any goals that you may have written down or set. It's kind of irrelevant to the goal, but prioritizing the goal is going to distract you to some degree to how much attention you can give to the step that you're on.
I've enjoyed this conversation because it sounded sober. It sounds very sober. It sounds almost like the end of, I guess, just getting drunk and being irresponsible and then going, oh shit, I keep knocking shit over because I'm kind of drunk and irresponsible. So you just settle down, you have a coffee, you end up looking at the mess, you clean it up, you do all that. You don't feel great about it, but you kind of do too, because at least you're coming to terms with it,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't feel so fucking sloppy. You feel like at least you're here now.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about that previously, being drunk on ego. And it very much is like being drunk. And it's only because you can only pay attention to so many things. And that's true in reality. Government knows this. They did studies back in the 30s. I think we can juggle like 30 odd topics from day to day before we start losing focus on other topics. Think about how many things you think about yourself. Let me rephrase that. Don't think about how many things you think about yourself, but be aware of them as they slide through unendingly. Focusing on them takes your attention from everything else. You can see a thought in passing, and that's enough. You don't have to grab it, bring it up close, and stare at it because it makes you uncomfortable. The discomfort will pass, just as the thought does. But your intelligence is already learning, it's already working with it. It's just the panic, it's just the need to feel in control. It's really all it is. It's the only reason that we grab for all these thoughts and fears and needs and doubts and all that is just because we're like, God, I don't know what's going to happen next. But if I can consider everything, maybe I will. And in our effort to do so, we lose sight of everything. We actually have the exact opposite impact on our life. In an effort to be in control and be intelligent and know what to do and be the right kind of person, we get farther and farther from a place where we feel fulfilled or authentic or enough. And it seems counterintuitive because, of course, it feels good to be drunk in the short term. But it's not until you get over that short term good and thus the drop that happens afterwards that you start to realize life was just fine before you got all drunk. Life was just great. Maybe you weren't paying attention. Maybe you didn't slow it down enough to appreciate it. But if you do, you'll see it. And it has nothing to do with feeling good about yourself and everything to do with just feeling like yourself without the need to be more. That said, this has been a dope episode. We're not going to wrap up quite yet. I just want to talk about a few cool things that have been happening. As Andrew said, we've been off for a little while. There was a period of illness in there, which unfortunately interrupted a planned camping trip, but it did allow for some reflection. It did allow for some additional contacts to be made, a little bit more time on the administrative side for the business. It did allow a lot of time. We have some exciting things coming up in season 7. We have exciting things coming up in general. I can't spill the beans yet because we have an investor newsletter coming out in the next week or so, and then we will be letting everybody know on Patreon towards the end of this month in early September what season 7 is going to look like. But I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody. We know we've been gone for a little while here. We really appreciate you listening to the podcast, living your life, applying this as best you can, because it really is important to recognize it's not about the conversation until it is. And then when it's about the conversation, it's only about the conversation until it's not. And what I'm saying is that there's a swinging of the pendulum. There's going to be time when you're going to need to practice being here and not in your head. And then there's going to be time when you can sit back and marvel at how much is actually in your head without being threatened by it. You can learn from all of it without it knocking you off your guard or knocking you off your feet. You can be the rock that the waves pummel against and never threaten. But that doesn't mean you always have to be there. You can quite easily be the rock and ignore the goddamn waves just by being here. But they both have value. So no matter where you are, if you feel like, oh, I'm thinking too much, well, don't think about that more. So maybe you are. Okay. You'll notice as soon as you go, okay, maybe I'm thinking too much. That's one less thought. There's one less judgment there. It's as easy as it is. Accept it. Accept what you're going through. Just accept it. Stop running from it. And before you know it, it'll take you right back here. Because this is what's always happening here and now.
We do have a lot of real things happening and not with necessarily an intention of some long-term focus, but just a lot of opportunities to give a lot of time and attention to certain things and see what happens. Because when the focus isn't so much about trying to predict the future via goals, via shoulds, via, timing, oh, clock's ticking, gotta get this thing done, this goal finished, solved, overcome, blah, 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 blah. When it is about more time and attention to things and seeing what's available, the opportunities available, and making the most of those, there's an excitement in that you don't even know how things are going to go, where something's going to lead. But, the more attention given to it, the more opportunities are going to be seen. It's like with all of the future focused sort of priorities, that's where the tunnel vision comes from. It's like trying to predict the future is tunnel vision. You only get one little perspective. And when you relax a little bit more, when it isn't so much about, you know, assuming that you could predict the future, assuming that, even the thoughts in your head about some future aren't real. They're not what's happening. They're passing through just like the feelings pass through. You get a wave of, you know, seeing someone walk through in a coffee shop previous life, and you get a wave of that. Maybe some thoughts come with it. And that's always the case with thoughts, but thoughts we have the opportunity to dig into no matter what we're doing. You could be lying in your bed and that being all that's happening in your life before bed, and be going through all different cycles of certain thoughts. And those aren't really happening. And there's no way to even know, any of it, quite frankly. And so when it isn't so much about the next thing or trying to see 10 steps down the road, that focus expands. It's like the tunnel vision becomes, a big long, I don't know, moat that keeps moving, it keeps going, and there's all these opportunities that you start seeing along that are here, that are in reality. And it's like it kind of inverts, or it's, you know, perpendicular to the tunnel vision. And that's where things are happening, and where there's an ability to almost use your mind. And I think that's the phrase, your mind is a terrible master, but a fantastic servant, beautiful servant, terrible master. I think that tunnel vision is when it's a master. Like that's how you're using your mind to try to predict the future, which is impossible. And the alternative is that it's a servant, that you're in reality and you're able to, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, my mind is back. I'm not focusing because I'm not focusing on it. It's like the focus on your mind is the thing that creates the tunnel vision and cuts you off from the rest of it. It's like picking a thought. That's the tunnel vision right there. And then there's no way to see anything else. And it's all you see, and it's all your focus. And then the focus becomes either overcoming that, or letting it go, or dropping it, because it's all you can see. It's all you can think about. And the alternative is understanding that you don't know. You're not sure. You can't guarantee what's going to be next, and then you're way more capable of handling what's actually happening when you're able to use your mind, but it doesn't come with this sense of, a guarantee, or that false certainty, or the feeling that you even know what's best, but it's not something that feels as necessary when it isn't the focus. It almost doesn't even make sense to try and assume. It's like, yeah, of course I don't know what's next. That's ridiculous to assume that you could. And that's a much different, much fuller experience. And that's where the conversation can be connecting, or what the conversation's pointing to, because that can be another focus that creates tunnel vision in your path, or your personal path or journey.
Absolutely. I just want to take a moment to celebrate yet another swinging of the pendulum, because, oh, I think we've come back to this place so many times over 6 seasons. Like, it's just so funny. But every time it feels a little bit deeper, a little bit newer. It almost feels like, oh my God, I've never seen this like this. Like, no, you did, but only to the depth that you were willing to. And this is what maturity is. Maturity is the recognition that you are a part of life and that we are all in this together. It is letting go of that selfishness that is the environment within your thoughts. That's what maturity is. And I, for one, rather enjoy this journey. True, a lot of it has been, but I really like doing that. It's like, yeah, but you like doing that because you think it means something about you, and you're kind of forgetting everybody else while you like doing that. And it's like, yeah, that's true. And after a while, though, you're like, right, I didn't really need that, though. My life is better without that. So many things, like so many things come down to that. And that's maturity, the recognition that you're enough. But how do you react to that? You're going to react to that gracefully. You're going to react to that bitterly. Like, oh, I can't ever get anything. It shouldn't mean anything by me. Or you're just going to keep going and see what happens, and stop trying to tell yourself what life is all about and how it should feel and how it's going to end up and what it means about you, and just find out. You know, you don't go onto a roller coaster trying to know every bend that's going to come. Oh, here comes round number 3. Oh, and you like, it would ruin it for you. So ride the ride. Take what you can from it. Sometimes it's going to scare you, but then that's going to pass. And that's as simple as it gets. So I just wanted to celebrate another round around the merry-go-round, as it were. I look forward to going back into confusion some more and then coming back towards clarity once more, because that really is the cycle. And it does inform us, and it informs our empathy. And it really does make you look at other people and go, I don't want to add any weight to your life. You got enough shit going just on your own.
Yeah, it definitely is quite the ride, and worthwhile, when you don't question it so much or need to decipher it or dissect it. Life feels incredibly full when I don't zoom into one particular part or onto one concept. Um, but even when I do, and then being able to see that and just laugh it off, because it's like, oh, yeah, that happened again. What else is happening? What else is going on right now? And then just being able to take that in, and then in no time, it's, that moment of confusion is forgotten, or I'd say it isn't the focus anymore. And on that note, we are going to wrap this up. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this episode, season 6, episode 41, as we're getting to the end or closer to the end of season 6. And so excited to stay on this journey and keep going to whatever happens next.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.